This morning in New York City, a painting owned by Clarkson University in Potsdam sold at auction for, are you ready? $2.8 million. It's a replica of a portrait of George Washington, one of several that were inspirations for the dollar bill. It's a fascinating story of founding fathers and frat boys. We'll hear more about it on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central, and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, January 23rd. First up, the Adirondack Park Agency approved a battery storage site near Great Sacandaga Lake at its meeting yesterday. The proposal got a lot of pushback from locals who worry about the risks of fire and contamination. Emily Russell has the details.
There are more than 7,000 battery storage sites around New York. They're part of the state's effort to stabilize the electric grid while using cleaner energy like wind and solar. The APA's John Berth gave the board a bit of a crash course in battery storage sites at its meeting yesterday.
The storage system serves various functions, including providing backup power during grid disturbances or power outages. They can also assist in load leveling during peak demands, which avoids
a company called Carson Power wants to build a 10-megawatt storage site in the southern Adirondacks. The APA's Devin Korn presented the project to the board.
Each 5-megawatt system will include 6 lithium-ion battery units and 2 pad-mounted inverters within a fenced enclosure.
The project will sit on about an acre of land that's already been cleared right off of State Route 30 near the village of Northville. There was some discussion of how visible the utility poles would be from the road, but the bigger issue for the board was the threat of fire. Fires are very rare. They have an incident rate of just 2% for these kinds of projects. That's according to state data. But fires at battery storage sites do happen, and they're hard to put out. APA board member Rush Holt said he's concerned about that risk.
Lithium fires, even of the latest lithium compounds, are really hot and really persistent. So it burns for days, hotter, far hotter than a residential fire.
A battery storage site in Orange County caught fire just last month. One in Jefferson County in 2023 burned for days. APA staff said there are strict safety protocols in place for these projects. The company is required to provide specialty training for local emergency responders. Still, some locals who commented on the project, like Mike Breen, weren't convinced the local crews could handle a potential fire.
They're volunteer fire department. Listen, the joke used to be, and I don't mean insulting anybody, look, they saved another chimney or bathtub, okay? They're not qualified. The area is just simply not qualified.
A few years ago, a larger storage site was proposed in Racket Lake. That project got a lot of local pushback, and eventually the developers pulled out. At Thursday's meeting, the board weighed the benefits with the risks, and ultimately they passed the project with unanimous support. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio, Raybrook.
So in the late 1700s, George Washington was a mega celebrity, but he didn't like to sit for portraits. Still, somehow, great portraitist Gilbert Stuart managed to get one, and it became the image of the first president. A replica of that portrait ended up in the hands of Clarkson University. Martha Willoughby is an expert in American art and a consultant for Christie's, which sold the replica this morning for $2.8 million.
So once he did sit for Stuart, he decided that it was, he did 3 separate poses. It was the second pose. This is the one that's now known as the Athenaeum type that Gilbert Stuart favored for his replicas. That's why there's so many of the Athenaeum ones, because those are the ones he would replicate. Now, when we say use the word replicate, we mean it to say it really, each painting is its own original, but he's basing it on the first one he did. He was so talented, he could do these quite quickly. The brush strokes are, especially in the clothing and the surroundings, if there are any, are quite hastily done. And so he was able to generate a lot of income by painting these. He famously said that these were his $100 bills.
And then, speaking of $100 bills,
Mhm.
is that sort of part of the reason that it ended up being the model for the $1 bill, because there was so little background and it was just sort of sparer and just a good look at Washington's face? Like, how did it become the model for the $1 bill?
Well, I think that's a great way to look at it. I hadn't thought of it that way. Absolutely. The head is isolated beautifully in these portraits. But I think it came to be, and I don't know the full details on the background of why it was chosen. It was just because it had become such a part of the national consciousness of that's what Washington looked like. One of the artists who trained under Stuart, John Neagle, is known to have said, his likeness of Washington became such the accept. I'm paraphrasing here. His likeness of Washington became such the standard likeness that if Washington were come back from the dead and not look like the portrait, no one would believe him.
We're going to skip ahead here a lot. This was in the early 1800s, and how did it come to be this one copy, this one replica? How did it come to be owned by Clarkson University?
Well, working backwards, it was donated to Clarkson in 1951 by Richard Livingston Clarkson. And he was a direct descendant, an old New York family, direct descendant of Matthew Clarkson. So the Clarkson family established the university and had deep ties to it. So it was a logical place for him to donate something that he valued.
And had it just been bought and sold over more than 100 years?
It had two major owners, President Madison and his family until mid-19th century, and then William Aspinwall, an industrialist, and his family basically for the second half of the 19th century. Then it went through several hands of collectors and dealers in New York until it was purchased by Richard Clarkson in 1929 in New York City.
So here's this incredibly famous and influential replica portrait of George Washington. What was it doing at Clarkson University all these years from, the 50s, onward?
When it was given in 1951, and this is important for its history of Madison, it was given with the knowledge that it was owned by Madison, although it wasn't, explicitly stated. That hasn't reached the general scholarship in the field. It's only through the sale process that we've been able to fully uncover that and confirm that that is the case. It had really been lost in the scholarship about what this portrait's history was. So it was at the Clarkson and generally, well preserved, looked after, but not the focus of the Clarkson, so it wasn't getting a lot of attention.
Was it hanging on a wall, or was it in a closet, or
I think it probably went through several places. I believe most recently it was hanging on a wall in I would have to ask them, but maybe it was one of the department buildings, but they are not known to have an art collection, so it didn't have a lot of like-minded objects around it.
What do you know about this one episode where some frat boys stole the painting and took it off?
Well, I think it was in 1968, and at the time there was some press about it, and there's been recent press about it too. What I've read, I've seen that they stole it, not realizing it was an original portrait. When I say that Gilbert Stuart painted these, and it became sort of the standard acceptance of what Washington looked like, thousands of artists have copied Gilbert Stuart. So there are copies all over the place, and it's very understandable that these students would have thought it was a copy. And I think in the story I've read, they were debating between the painting and an ashtray, maybe. Anyway, they chose the painting. And it was only when it got on the news how valuable it was, and it was valuable at that time, that they realized they had done something they really had not intended. So they delivered it basically safely back, and I think all's well that ends well because it wasn't damaged.
Martha Willoughby is a consultant with Christie's Auction House in New York. There's lots more to this story, and you can find more of that interview at ncpr.org. More news there through the weekend as well. Music today by the Caramello Trio and Beth Robinson, both of Potsdam. Have a super weekend. I'm David Sommerstein.